Well, thank you so much for having me. I do, like Luke, I'm a Cinda first-timer. I've been at Yext for 9 years, and I lead our global customer success organization. And we couldn't be more excited to be here with all of you. I know Yext has been a presence for many years, and Berlin is one of my favorite cities. So thank you for having us and having me again. So quick question. Raise your hand if you have customers. Raise your hand if you are a customer. I think that probably covers all of us, right? So as a customer success leader, I am constantly thinking about people like all of us, customers, people who have customers. What do we want? What do we need? And how are those things changing each and every day? And just meeting customer expectation these days has never been harder, right? It's a constantly changing world. And ironically, though, it has never been more important. The paradox of choice is real. And as consumers, we've never had more places to consume content. And our attention spans feel like they are getting shorter and shorter each and every day. Can anyone relate to that, right? And so I was at a conference a few weeks ago in Florida with a lot of fascinating discussions about everything we're talking about here. A lot of the same conversations we heard from the group earlier, but a lot on AI and digitization of the world, and how we use those things in business. Instead of what I thought would be a ton of focus on how to use the technology, we spent so much more time talking about how to empower our teams to live and work and thrive in this world. A lot of the conversation Stefano was just referencing earlier. Skills like cognitive thinking, analytical thinking, curiosity, empathy, regenerative resilience, a term that I really hadn't heard before, were key topics of conversations on how do we inject the human element into the world of AI, and what does that mean for customer experience? And so as we think about what impact AI will have on this world of customer experience, we have to lean in on the things that make us uniquely human when we have human-led roles. So where's AI subbing in versus where are we leading with that human touch? And how do we lean in on the skills that make us unique in those instances? So I challenge each of you as leaders to think about how are you empowering your teams and your organizations to thrive in this era of chaos, of disruption, of endless choice, because we know one thing's for certain, it's only gonna continue speeding up, right? So let's dig into it. In a world of chaos and disruption, being honest about what captivates our customer and how we think about captivating their time is so essential. And we all know without that proper focus and time, we're at risk of being superseded by the next thing that's going to captivate somebody's attention. And there are so many competing priorities. Over the last decade, we've seen the digital landscape explode across so many different channels. As we sit here today, there are more and more places to go and touch points to use. But the expectation of quality and consistency across all these places we go is there. Everyone wants that consistent information wherever we go. And for any business, let alone a small business, it's a massive strain, right? At the end of the day, it is a huge strain to keep up with all the places that our customers are looking for that information. But consistency is so key. And what's behind all of it is content. So think about your own personal digital journey each and every day. What brings you to Twitter over going to a local news site? Why do you use a chatbot on a site instead of picking up the phone to call customer service? Why would you trust a listing on Google versus maybe competing hours on a local website? It all comes down to the fact that we are looking for the clearest answers in the shortest amount of time. And it comes back to that focus and time thing again. So if we make it personal for a minute, for those of you I haven't had a chance to meet yet, I like to spend a lot of time outside. I'm active, and this spring I was searching for a new triathlon bike. And as I think about my own journey and the steps and the places I went to do so, I wanted to go to a place where I could give as much information as possible, as quickly as possible. Ideally, I wouldn't even have to give it. And that source would take that all in and not only just tell me what bike would be recommended, but why. The why. I wanted to know the why, and I wanted to know it as quickly as possible. So the internet over the last several decades has really taught us all to expect to search online for the who, the what, the where, and the when. And those have been kind of the core concepts as we've thought about the digital search journey over the last several years. But with the rise of AI, we now really want the how and the why, and we want that quicker than we've ever wanted it. We want that clear understanding of what the answer is and why you're recommending it for me. And so these elements are key as we think about tying that back to customer expectations, customer experience, and building a key component of them all, which is trust. That trust and connection, going back to the human empathy. It probably has you thinking in the not so distant future, are we going to be in a world where we all have a personal digital assistant that is helping us along a digital journey from start to finish at each step of the way, explaining the how, the why we got here, what's being shown to me, and prompting us with follow-ups, reminders? Probably sounds similar to what we're already experiencing, right? So I'll go out on a limb and say, I think we're already there. I think we're already there, and what's missing is that connectivity between all these disparate sources and the content that's shown in each one of these places. That consistency, I think, is where we have a lot of work to do as we think about how AI can play a part in a contiguous digital journey for us. And so we're a broken record. We've been here many years. You've heard from a lot of Yexters over the years. And we often talk about a lot of the same things, as John joked. And for those of you that were here last year, you heard from Mark Ferrantino talk about content generation. I think you've heard content generation talked about from Yext from so many of us over the last few years. But here, May 2023, I think so much has changed. If we look back over the last year and the explosion in quantum leaps of language models and things we'll talk about here, so much has changed, but so much has really stayed the same. And what has stayed the same is content. Content is the base of everything. And how are we finding it? How are we connecting it? How are we structuring it? And how are we leveraging it in a way that can make use of all the powerful technology that's out there? So what's next? How do we enable you and all of our customers together to play in this world in the not so distant future? What are some tactical steps that can help us along this journey? And we think the key to harnessing the power of AI is the data strategy. And the data strategy, I'll say again and again, is really just the content knowledge strategy. First and foremost, centralizing that data, that knowledge, and ensuring it's in a centralized place, it's connected of all the disparate sources, is key to success and scale. Consistency, it's been an age-old adage. All of us in this room talk about data, consistency, how that has an impact on search and local. But with the rise of these large, powerful language models, data correctness has a whole new level of importance. Have any of you tried asking ChatGPT to write a bio of yourself yet? Anyone do that? I'm sure many have, yeah. And there's always a few fake facts in there, right? It's not always 100% correct. So for a business, just one instance of that incorrect data getting published somewhere is a huge liability, right? Which is why so many companies are cracking down on access to ChatGPT and OpenAI because it feels like too big of a risk. And we'll get into that later a little bit about what the risks are and how we think we can mitigate those. But it's top of everyone's mind today as we think about using some of these new things. If we go to the source, Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, he says, too much of the processing power, for lack of a better word, is going into using the models as a database instead of using the models as reasoning engines. I think this is an incredibly powerful statement as we think about using, harnessing, channeling this technology. We all think about going to ChatGPT and having access to every fact, but we know it cut off the last time the model was trained, right? And so access to information shouldn't just be about going to one of these sites, using the new ChatGPT app that just came out. It's about the data and how are we getting the data into these reasoning engines versus the opposite, using them as databases. So if we look back over the last several decades, within the big categories of our digital landscape, I think that there's been a ton of explosion. And if we think about these technologies that in this room many of us have built, we're all, of course, using, our customers are using, we have vendors for each and every one of these things. We have content management systems, which are really just knowledge as content. We have support, which is knowledge as a service. We have chat and search and all of these things. They're really just different forms of knowledge across so many different fragmented partners. And every language model on the planet wants to get their hands on our data, right? If we go back to that quote. Because they want to be able to provide more factual interactions with their end consumers. But the problem is only getting bigger, and this world is getting more and more fragmented, which is, it's scary and hard to believe because it feels like we've come from a place of fragmentation, but it's only exploding in quantum leaps. So if we go back to just April of last year, this is a little landscape of language models across all the different ones that were known at the time, not fully exhaustive, but a lot of the big ones that are out there, the big names. So just over a year ago. If we skip ahead to December of last year, not but 6-8 months later, explosion. How many more models do we see on the slide here? And skip ahead to March of this year, even more growth and expansion. The quantum leaps that these models are enabling are incredibly powerful, and the technology is getting better each and every day. And what are we doing about it here in our seats? And what's more is that how many of you have been in a pitch with a solution partner or provider lately, and some of those first slides talking about a new release are the new AI-powered release. The AI-powered what, right? Every solution provider, we're all in it. We're walking in, we're working each and every day, thinking about how we're to incorporate these in our platforms and our product stacks, because it's hot, it's powerful, it is top of mind for everyone, and it's truly an opportunity, and it's everywhere. But what does that actually mean? Here we go. What does that actually mean? So if we break that down, this is really just common algebra. We can probably just factor out the AI here, and what we net out is knowledge. Knowledge is behind each and every one of these applications of AI, and that knowledge, again, is back to content. And so as we think about the future of digital experiences and customer experience, it's really the knowledge about your business and the brand that's coupled up with AI, the right language model in the right place for the right use case, that is really going to determine the future of the digital experience platform. And I think that probably seems a little uncomfortably simplistic for many of us, but I think that's definitely what's going to happen. In fact, it's already happening. And it seems like a big leap, perhaps, from where we sit today at the forefront of this. But if we look back to the language model slide of December 2022, it's happening so incredibly quickly. Click here. So I might even go out on a limb and say that AI is maybe already a commodity. It's a commodity that can be swapped out for different purposes, depending upon the use case. And what we all will control is the data that goes into the model, and then the experience with which that data or that content that's generated is applied. And I think that's where so much of this strategy comes from, is what are the things going in, and then how do we dictate the places where that content goes. And so, again, in sum, I think our AI strategy across any different digital platform or use case is our content strategy. And we, the business, are in control of the ends of that spectrum, and then mapping where the right model fits into the middle of it. So let's change gears now and talk about some real potential use cases for small businesses as we think about how a certain business could use an application of this content. So first up, Lexi's Bike Shop. Summer cycling season, as you already heard from me earlier, is here. And let's imagine I'm running this bike shop. We want to run a promotion, which is a special, a free tune-up for anyone who's had a bike that's 2 years old or more, right? We want to distribute this offer via email, social, and we want to leverage all the content we already have in our content management system, and leverage the right language model to generate it, to distribute it to each of the 4 digital experiences highlighted. This is an awesome, simple use case of the power of content, scale, and AI together. We want to generate 4 outputs within the bounds of that preconfigured content we already have. We don't want to generate new content. And the final touch of this is going back to empathy, is the human touch. We can use an AI-powered content management system to generate that offer, generate the copy that'll go through each one of these channels and distributed in those 4 outputs, and have a human review it add those final touches, tweak a little bit of the language, and that's really the efficiency play there, right? We're using AI, we're using that efficiency that Stefano talked about earlier, but we are injecting the human empathy at the last stage to ensure that it has a little Lexi's Bike Store touch to it. Another use case, Lexi's Bike Shop has expanded. We now sell shoes, but you can imagine we are very overwhelmed at this expansion, and we really need to streamline our customer experience costs. They're rising as they are in so many, so many of these small businesses. So this is a great use case here of harnessing the power of AI to bring down those customer service costs with a chat experience. A chat experience that can sit on top of that same exact content management system that's connected to many different sources of knowledge, including things like my customer data, knowledge bases about products information about the shoes, and is a really good way to very easily bring down customer service costs without a huge effort and really remove humans from the loop and use them where best needed. And last but not least, we are clearly thriving here at Lexi's, and we've also invested in a handy services business, so Lexi's Handy Services. Here's an example of, let's say, through analyzing search data on our website, so using search as a tool, not just an application, we discovered that customers are actually searching for painting services on our site in addition to the handy services we already provide today. The volume is high enough, say, that I really think we should test these waters. And rather than investing full on and adding painting as a full service to our fleet, I'm going to generate some content to build demand for painting and think about testing the waters before we make that major investment into expansion. So again, with this best-in-class AI content management system, it's really as simple as adding painting as a service, as an entity into the knowledge graph, and generating the content we need to distribute to each of these channels. And this is where the AI does what it does best, leveraging the right language model for each of these applications, having the AI do the work, and then again, having the human review the last step before we push it out to publish. As you can tell, Lexi's bike, shoe, and handy woman empire is really thriving because we're using AI to generate content that's relevant for each channel. We're not taking the same offer and posting it to email. We're not posting every single thing to all the same channels. We're using the right language models. We're using the content management system in order to get bespoke content out and test the waters in each of those channels. And I think that that's key as we think about scale and leveraging AI in the best way possible. So I'm going to keep saying it. Our content strategy is really just our knowledge strategy. But let's go back to that but. It's the risks that are in our face each and every day. We're hearing about them in headlines, and they're oftentimes terrifying. It's like humans or robots are taking over. They're the crazy thing from earlier this year about the love story with the chatbot. I feel like each and every day there's some scary headline out there that's dissuading us all from why we should be thinking about using AI in our businesses. But if we really peel it all back, I think we could probably all agree that the benefits far outweigh the risks, as long as they're properly managed. And I think that the solution to so many, if not all, of these common risks is that content and data strategy. How do we put content at the center of everything and think about confining the language models to a set of content that is approved by you? It's content that you're already using in other places. It's not content that was scraped 2 years ago that is sitting in the OpenAI database that might at this point be out of date. It's content that's already in your content management system and it is approved by the business. And with this centralized strategy, we can use AI incredibly flexibly. We can create so many different types of content that are all, as I said, purpose-built for the relevant digital channel you want it to be distributed, and the relevant channel for the customer experience in that channel. And getting started, as we think about where do we go from here, right? How do we get started? If I'm a small business, if I'm a large business, it isn't as daunting as the media might want to make it seem for all of us, right? First, I think we really need to think about identifying that central source of data. Where does it live? Does it live in many different places today? For many businesses, it's a spreadsheet. It's a spreadsheet that's uploaded into a database on a regular basis. It's 7 of those that are compiled and brought together. But that's a first step, is where does all this stuff live? And getting into the weeds on a data architecture exploration is the first step. Next is pairing that with the right AI. I think going back to those models, the big explosions, the models that I showed earlier, the right AI is such a key part of this. ChatGPT is an incredible conversational tool. It might not be the right one to generate content, right? And so how do we think about getting smart and using the right tools in the right places and pairing that with your content to be able to create at scale? And finally, most importantly, it's coming back to the humans and the customer experience. How do we best keep humans in the loop? What's the most efficient way to do so that we can inject that empathy, that trust, and that connection at each and every step of the way without being inefficient and redundant? And so in sum, I think we see the future of digital experiences as driven by the customer, right? The customer. And providing direct information via search and other methods of conversation. And I think that this dialogue really truly creates a flywheel effect. It's a flywheel that will constantly be helping to optimize content for each and every person that searches next. What I search for, I get a response. How do we learn from that so that the next person looking for the same piece of content gets a better experience? And how are we improving at each and every step of the way? Because we know one thing is for certain, this flywheel is moving faster and faster each and every day. And the chaos, the disruption is really going to continue as we see this quantum leap into the future is really here. But what's behind all of it is truly just its content. So we couldn't be more excited to be here with all of you this week to learn more ways that you all are thinking about using AI. I'd love to hear from Stefano about a lot of the ways that he's thinking about leveraging and harnessing technology to be efficient while keeping humans in the right places at the right time to ensure that as we think about truly delivering customer experience, how are we continuing to focus on trust and connection? Because our attention spans are short, very short, and there's a lot of priorities out there. So thank you so much for having us here at Yext. I'm excited to chat with all of you over the next couple of days. I think we'll now open up for questions.
Good.
So you just heard the 4 CEOs, okay, and you heard Stefano. So who's really definite that AI is the next way to, I don't want to say replace employees, but to augment the situation.
Yeah.
What was your comment on the 4 opinions you heard today?
I personally couldn't agree more. And I think that as we look at things like content generation and taking, say, a product SKU, if we can take a product SKU that has a description about that product and then be able to use AI to generate bespoke descriptions about whatever information we want to get out there. Is it a Q&A about components of that product? Is it we're trying to sell the product? Is it an offer? How can we use AI instead of using copywriters that we may have used before? How can we use AI to generate those descriptions and then have the human review it, tweak it, rather than end-to-end be sitting there trying to create? And I think that writer's block is a real thing. Any of us who have tried to generate content from the start, whether it's a speech, whether it's a blog, whether it's a description, takes a little bit to get going. Whereas the kickstart of having just content generation as an example, to have something to start with and then tweak it is going to be so much more efficient. So I think that's just one example of where the power of technology will make us all better and more efficient and productive.
I've got one more question.
Yeah.
One of the massive advantages that Syndic gets from having a really long-term great partner like Yext is your resources, right? Yep. We don't have too many listed companies in the room, and maybe 1 or 2 others, but how does Yext go about making the decision for what they're going to work on in terms of AI? I mean, so how does that process happen?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. And there's a ton of Yexters here in the room. We're lucky enough to have one of our senior product managers here, Andrew Sanchez, as well. So I hope many of you get a chance to meet him over the next couple of days if you haven't already. And I'm sure he'll have a much, much better answer on how he prioritizes time and innovation. But I think I'm going to be cliche and come back to content and data. I think over the years, we have collected so much content based on the products we've had, listings, pages, now search, chat. And I think we can learn so much from ways that our own customers are using technology and how their customers are looking for information. And so I'll just take, for example, search as an example. We launched a couple years ago. And search on a website or search in a knowledge base, search in a support use case is an awesome tool. But we don't always want to be prompted to start that journey on our own. And I think when we think about chat and customer interaction, there's a time and a place where you want to be in a live chat experience versus where you want to be in a search experience. So how can we as a company learn from the trends that are happening in the ecosystem, but be better about learning from the ways in which our own customers are using our technology today to pick and choose and prioritize the ways in which we can enhance the platform. And I think that that's something that's not always top of mind for a lot of companies is the need and the want to just keep building and keep up with what's happening in the ecosystem versus getting really smart and keeping the way in which your own customers are using that technology today top of mind. So probably what you'd expect from a success leader to answer. Let's think about how our customers are using things today and how we enhance those and build upon them versus just continuing to follow the lead.
I have one more too, Kim. Sorry.
Yeah.
I have the microphone.
Yeah.
There's probably a lot of pressure in the market as well to come out with AI products.
Yeah.
Right? So how does Yext make sure that the ideas that are coming out, the products that you're bringing out, or the features that are added on top of the products aren't half-baked?
Yeah. That's a really, really good question. And so I think this goes back to our platform of evolution over the last decade or so. And as you peel back the things that we've done, really we started as a content management system for listings data, right? Name, address, phone, all of you that use Yext today or customers, it's really, we're collecting that content from wherever it lives, and we're making sure that it's in the right format for the right publisher, sending that via API, and truly that's a listings content management system, right? And as the platform grew, that content expanded. And so in 2018, there was a really important inflection point at Yext as we moved from having a pretty basic back end of a bunch of fields and custom fields that grew and grew and grew to really thinking about the graph and a knowledge graph and putting data and content as a first-class citizen in the strategy of the product suite, which I think really enabled us to play in the world that is today with AI and the rapid acceleration of it in a way that we hadn't before. Because, again, the structure of the graph, the structure of the way we store that data, whether it's name, address, phone number going out to a listing, whether it's a knowledge card about a product, going back to my example earlier, that data can be stored in its own bespoke way and used for so many different use cases. And I think that then comes back to how are we investing in the right things? Content's the number one place. And so then how are we investing in the right language models? How are we using our own data science team to think about which models should be used for which use cases? And I think there's a lot of really cool stuff going on right now as we think about sentiment analysis and things like content generation for review response. Which models are best for that versus powering chat experiences versus search. And I think that's where a lot of that experimentation comes in is what's the right model for the right use case, where you leverage one that's already built versus where you build your own. And that's where a lot of the experimentation comes in versus just thinking about, let's build for that. Really, it's build the structure and the base so that we have the playground to play in and then layer on top.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I think this is the last question or Stephanie's going to kill me. But I'm just interested on speed, okay?
Yeah.
We are a different industry today than we were 20 years ago or 30 years ago, but speed was not always, this industry was not always the fastest, okay? For Stefano, he's really in it. How important is speed for a competitive advantage for the group sitting here?
I think it's pretty important. And it kind of feels like we're on a roller coaster of change, right? And it oftentimes feels hard to keep up and take a breath and like, where am I? What's going on? But I'll share a quick example. A customer of ours shared with me last week that they're using content generation just to update their business descriptions for listings. So they're just generating net new bespoke descriptions that are going out to the publishers for listings, and using competitive intelligence and trackers, they were able to identify in just 2 months after publishing, using content generation to create these, tweaking them, and then publishing them, that they had increased their search ranking by a huge amount. And I think that story to me is compelling enough that it doesn't have to be this huge, massive strategy that everything's changing. Pick something small and simple. It could just be a couple locations, right? Versus a big, broad strategy. How are we thinking about starting small and getting in there and using versus sitting around pontificating about the big blowout, rollout strategy? Because I think that's probably what kills us all. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Would you say that AI models the Google business information of the SMB is very important, or does it get less important because AI is searching different than humans? Actually, we only use Google, but if it stays important, how do you, as Yext, think we can tackle the problem with Google doing third-party verification way more difficult for beginning with June?
Yeah. I think it's such an important question. Google's another source of that content, and how are they getting it? Right today, in the verification, they take a small set of fields. How do we imagine a world where there's a lot more data that can be passed in a structured, formulaic way versus the things we're doing in other sources, structuring our websites, making sure that content is marked up and available in other places for them to access? And I think it's an ongoing conversation of where does the graph live? Whose graph is the authoritative graph? Google has a big one, but how are they keeping their content up to date? OpenAI has one, but we know that that's not up to date. And I think that's an ongoing conversation of what's the source of truth? And I think in the absence of that, as we see so much evolution and change, focusing on your own data, the customer's data, where does that live, and keeping that in a structured way versus just having dependencies on the third parties is going to be really key. So the last thing I'll say, if I have 5 more seconds, is a totally non sequitur change of heart, but I've used the opportunity to, as I talk to crowds like this, to really just leave you with one thing, which is your health. I think it's something we don't talk enough about in audiences with groups of high esteemed leaders. Health is so key. And I think over the last 6 months, in this world of chaos, change, disruption, focusing on yourself, what you eat, getting exercise, taking a 15-minute break, drinking water, just the basics, is something we should all be talking a lot more about. And I think I found it fascinating to hear the guys earlier just talk about generationally. I think some are pushing us to get more into this conversation. So I will leave you with that, is think about yourself and drink some water today and maybe take a 5-minute walk. Thank you so much.